The mist hangs like a funeral shroud over the fields of Agincourt. October 25th, 1415, St. Crispin's Day. Dawn breaks reluctant and gray across northern France, revealing a tableau frozen at the edge of annihilation. 6,000 men stand in silence. English, Welsh, starving, diseased, their boots caked in the same mud that has tormented them for 3 weeks. Behind them lies Harfleur, conquered at terrible cost. Before them lies Calais, salvation, home. And between stands the flower of French nobility. 20,000 knights, men-at-arms, crossbowmen, mounted cavalry gleaming in plate armor despite the damp air. Their banners a forest of silk and gold that stretches impossibly across the horizon. The field itself is narrow, perhaps 1,000 yards wide, squeezed between two dark woods. Tramicourt to the left, Agincourt to the right. Rain has fallen for days. The earth, recently plowed for winter wheat, has become a quagmire of sucking clay that pulls at every footstep. Somewhere in the English line, a young archer clutches his yew longbow, with hands gone numb from cold and fear. He is 20, perhaps younger. He has not eaten proper food in a week. Dysentery has hollowed his cheeks, yet he stands. King Henry V, 28 years old, walks among his men. He wears no crown this morning, only the armor of a warrior and the expression of a man who has bet everything on a single throw of fate's dice. Behind the French lines, drums begin their low, rhythmic thunder, the sound of empires marching, of inevitability, of history itself preparing to crush this audacious English king and his band of exhausted peasants. The moment stretches. Breath becomes visible in cold air. Arrows rest in quivers, swords remain sheathed. And in this terrible, beautiful instant before the storm, the medieval world holds its breath, for what happens next will be spoken of in whispers and songs for 600 years. The 100 Years' War had already consumed 3 generations when Henry V ascended the English throne in 1413. This was no mere border squabble between neighboring kingdoms. It was a fundamental contest over the very soul of France. English kings had claimed the French crown since 1337, when Edward III declared his right through his mother, Isabella of France. What followed was not continuous warfare, but rather a series of brutal campaigns punctuated by uneasy truces, each conflict leaving deep scars across the French countryside and aristocracy. By 1415, France was a kingdom divided against itself. King Charles VI suffered from fits of madness, leaving power fragmented among rival noble factions. The Armagnacs and Burgundians fought each other nearly as viciously as they fought the English, their civil war bleeding France of resources and unity. Henry V saw opportunity in this chaos. Young, ambitious, and driven by both genuine belief in his hereditary claim and cold political calculation, he prepared an invasion force to reclaim what he considered his rightful inheritance, the lands of Normandy, Aquitaine, and ultimately the French throne itself. In August 1415, Henry landed with 12,000 men and laid siege to Harfleur, the gateway to Normandy. The town held longer than expected. Dysentery ravaged the English camp. By the time Harfleur surrendered on September 22nd, Henry had lost half his army to disease, desertion, and battle casualties. The campaign season was ending. Winter approached. Any rational commander would have sailed home to England, consolidated gains, and returned with fresh forces in spring. But Henry was not rational. He was audacious. Against all counsel, he decided to march his depleted, sick army 260 miles northeast across hostile territory to reach the English-held port of Calais. It was a gesture of defiance, a demonstration that he would not slink away like a raider. It was also monumentally reckless. The French, finally stirred to unified action by this foreign invasion, assembled their forces to intercept him. The trap was set. Henry V was a contradiction wrapped in armor, a warrior poet, a calculating strategist who could inspire men through sheer force of will, yet who had executed former friends without hesitation when they plotted against him. Born in 1387, he had spent his youth fighting Welsh rebels in brutal mountain campaigns that taught him the unglamorous reality of war. Supply lines mattered more than valor. Terrain could defeat the strongest army, and common archers could kill noble knights. By 28, his face bore the scar of an arrow wound that had nearly killed him at Shrewsbury. He knew mortality intimately. The French command structure was more complicated, reflecting their fractured politics. Charles d'Albret, the Constable of France, held nominal supreme command, a veteran administrator, cautious by nature, who advocated for the sensible strategy of surrounding the English and starving them into submission. Jean-Jacques Lemingre, called Boucicaut, the Marshal of France, agreed. Both men had fought the Ottoman Turks at Nicopolis and understood that patience often defeated passion. But they were overruled by younger nobles hungry for glory, the Dukes of Orléans, Bourbon, and Alençon, who saw in the exhausted English army not a dangerous cornered animal, but an opportunity for easy ransoms and eternal fame. French chivalric culture demanded direct confrontation, cavalry charges, personal combat between equals. To win through siege and starvation was dishonorable. These young lords wanted battle, wanted to crush the English in open field combat where French numbers and superior armor would tell decisively. On the evening of October 24th, with French forces blocking the road to Calais, Henry faced his dilemma. He could not retreat. The French controlled all crossing points on the Somme behind him. He could not negotiate. He had already rejected French terms as insufficient. He could not avoid battle. Geography and enemy numbers made that impossible. His only option was to fight against odds of 3 or 4 to 1, with men so weakened that many could barely stand, on ground that would be chosen by his enemies. It was, by any military calculation, suicide. The English spent the night of October 24th in the mud-soaked fields around the village of Maisoncelles, too exhausted even for proper sleep. Rain fell intermittently. Men lay in their armor to keep it from being stolen, shivering through the darkness. Many suffered from dysentery, leaving them weak and humiliated. Food was nearly gone. Scraps of moldy bread, leather boiled to make it chewable. Some men had walked barefoot for days, their shoes dissolved by the constant march through wet terrain. They could hear the French camp across the field, could see the campfire stretching endlessly, could hear laughter and the sound of nobles gambling on how they would divide the English captives. Henry ordered silence in his own camp on pain of mutilation. Anyone speaking above a whisper would lose an ear. He needed his men focused, conserving what little energy remained. At dawn on October 25th, the feast day of St. Crispin and Crispinian, he arranged his forces with the precision of a man who knew one mistake would mean annihilation. The battlefield was perfect for his desperate gambit. The narrow field between the woods meant the French could not use their superior numbers to outflank him. Henry positioned his men-at-arms in the center, perhaps 1,000 knights and soldiers, dismounted, shoulder to shoulder in 4 tight ranks. On both flanks he placed his archers, 5,000 strong, in wedge formations that could concentrate fire on any approaching enemy. Each archer carried 2 bundles of arrows, 48 shafts of ash and steel. Each had trained since childhood to draw the 150-pound longbow that could pierce armor at 200 yards. Before the archers, driven deep into the mud at 45-degree angles, were thousands of sharpened wooden stakes, 6 feet long, points fire-hardened, a forest of spikes designed to impale charging horses. This innovation, learned perhaps from Ottoman tactics at Nicopolis, would prove crucial. The English line was 350 yards long, stretched thin, vulnerable, but it was also disciplined, desperate, and commanded by a king who had gambled everything on this moment. At 11 o'clock in the morning, after hours of tense waiting, the French began their advance. First came the cavalry, hundreds of mounted knights in full plate armor, lances lowered, advancing at a trot across the muddy field toward the English flanks where the archers stood. The ground shook, metal creaked and clattered. War cries echoed between the woods. This was the moment French military doctrine had trained for, the devastating cavalry charge that would sweep away common footmen and allow the real fighting to begin between nobles. But the mud betrayed them. Horses sank to their knees with each step, struggling, losing momentum. And then the arrows came. Not scattered shots, but massed volleys. 10,000 shafts arcing through gray October sky, so dense they darkened the air itself. Arrows struck horses in unarmored flanks and hindquarters, driving them mad with pain. Animals reared, screamed, threw riders, turned and galloped back into their own advancing lines. Knights hit by multiple arrows crashed from saddles, their 200-pound armor dragging them into the sucking mud where they drowned face down, unable to rise. Behind the ruined cavalry charge came the main French battle. Thousands of dismounted men-at-arms in the finest plate armor money could buy, advancing on foot toward the English center. They lowered their visors against the arrow storm, reducing vision to narrow slits. Heads bowed to protect faces, breath coming short through armor that trapped heat and exhaustion. They waded through mud churned to soup by cavalry. Each step required effort. Boots sank deep. Heavy armor gathered thick clay with every stride, adding 20 pounds to loads already crushing. The English archers adjusted their aim. At 100 yards, bodkin arrowheads penetrated even the best armor if they hit gaps at joints, armpits, visors. At 50 yards, they were unstoppable. French men-at-arms fell in heaps. Those who reached the English line arrived exhausted, gasping, unable to lift weapons effectively. The narrow battlefield compressed the French into a mass of bodies. Too many men in too little space, unable to maneuver, pushing from behind while those in front tried desperately to fight. The moment of reversal came not in a single instant, but in a horrifying cascade of collapse. French men-at-arms reached the English center and actually pushed it back initially through sheer weight of numbers. For brutal minutes, it was hand-to-hand combat. Swords against armor, maces crushing helmets, daggers seeking gaps in plate. French knights had trained their entire lives for this, and they fought with desperate courage against peasant archers they considered beneath their station. But exhaustion is merciless. The French could barely lift their weapons. Some, trapped in the crush of their own comrades pressing from behind, simply stood unable to move as English men-at-arms hammered at them with poleaxes. Others slipped in mud and, weighed down by armor, could not rise. Their comrades inadvertently trampled them, adding bodies to the carpet of dead and dying that grew with each passing minute. The narrow battlefield that had protected the English became a killing ground for the French. Too many soldiers compressed into too little space, unable to maneuver or retreat. Then the archers, having exhausted their arrows, dropped their bows and drew the weapons they carried for close combat. Swords, daggers, lead mallets, axes used to drive stakes into ground. Lightly armored, nimble, fueled by desperate fury, they charged into the French flanks. What followed was slaughter. French nobles in 70-pound armor, barely able to stand after struggling through mud and enduring arrow wounds, faced Welsh and English commoners, who moved easily in simple leather jerkins. The archers pulled French knights down into the mud, stabbed through visor slits, used mallets to beat helmets until the men inside lost consciousness or died from concussions. The Second French battle, seeing the carnage ahead, hesitated. Some nobles at the rear began to withdraw. Panic, that ancient destroyer of armies, rippled through the French lines. Within an hour, the field was carpeted with dead and dying Frenchmen, thousands upon thousands piled so thick in places that English soldiers stood atop corpses to continue fighting. The flower of French nobility lay broken in the October mud. When the fighting finally ceased, the scale of disaster became clear. Nearly 6,000 French soldiers lay dead on that narrow field. Among them the Constable Charles d'Albret, the Duke of Alençon, the Duke of Bar, and over 100 other nobles of high rank. Another 1,500 French lords were captured, including the Duke of Orleans, who would spend the next 25 years imprisoned in England. The English lost perhaps 400 men, many of noble birth, including the Duke of York, who suffocated in his armor after falling in the mud. Henry V, standing amid the carnage, asked a herald the name of the nearby castle. Upon hearing Agincourt, he declared that the battle would bear that name forever. He had achieved the impossible, a victory so complete, so improbable, that even the French chroniclers would struggle to explain it. Within weeks, he returned to London in triumph, paraded through streets where crowds sang his praises and poets composed verses celebrating this new English king who had humbled the greatest kingdom in Christendom. The Treaty of Troyes in 1420 recognized Henry V as heir to the French throne and regent of France. It seemed as though English dominance was assured, but Henry died of dysentery in 1422, just 35 years old, before he could claim his prize. His infant son inherited both crowns, but not his father's genius. Within 3 decades, inspired by a teenage girl named Joan of Arc, the French rallied, reclaimed their territories, and by 1453 had expelled the English from all French lands except Calais. Yet Agincourt endures. 6 centuries later, it remains the archetype of the underdog's victory, the triumph of discipline over numbers, of adaptability over tradition, of common men over aristocratic pride. Shakespeare immortalized it. Churchill invoked it. Military academies still study it. And on that field between Tramecourt and Agincourt, beneath the smoke and the broken steel and the terrible silence that follows battle, the destiny of an age was rewritten, not through inevitability but through mud, courage, and the deadly song of yew wood bows.